Come in, friends. The door is open. Won't you sit down? No, not there. Sit by the fire. Let the bristling flames warm you. It is chilly in here, as if the cold air of death were in the room. The door is closed. The demons are ready. Clutch your chair. You are trapped in the Chamber of Chills.
All the stories we tell are true. We believe in ghosts. Do you?
Chamber of Chills presents Mermaids. Brought to you by The Bat.
Last summer, I was dating this rich guy, Josh. He was a fashion photographer, but his parents were very rich already. I worked full-time as a model, which is how I met him. One day, Josh decided to take me on one of his dad's yachts. Well, it was supposed to be a date, but he decided to bring a couple of his douchebag friends and wanted to do a fashion shoot on the yacht with me modeling a new swimsuit. I was fine with the shoot, but not his friends. I found them obnoxious and shallow. We went to the beach and sailed a few miles from shore. Josh was photographing me modeling while I was on the edge of the boat. I heard something peculiar below in the water, like a woman singing underwater. When I looked down at the water, I saw the face of a woman which quickly faded underneath. I questioned myself as we were far out from shore and there were no boats around. Josh's friends started drinking tequila and smoking cannabis. They pressured me to drink and smoke even though they knew I was almost 1 year sober. I went into one of the rooms and Josh followed me. We argued, Josh saying his friends were just being friendly and that I overacted. I told him I wanted to go back on shore. He just told me to chill and went into one of the rooms to photo edit. I sat alone when I heard that peculiar singing followed by a similar singing from multiple voices. Then I heard 2 big splashes like people jumping into the water, followed by nothing. No singing, couldn't hear Josh's friends, just the waves of the ocean. I headed out and looked around. Josh's friends were nowhere. I looked off into the water and became startled as I saw blood in the water, lots of blood. Even before I could scream or call for Josh, I heard a woman's voice behind me.
Hey!
I turned and saw a woman in the water, leaning on the boat, looking at me.
Want to see something beautiful?
She said before swimming back. I walked over on the other side of the boat and saw the woman floating in the water. I looked closer and saw she was a goddamned mermaid. She smiled at me as she swam around, showing me her tail. She started singing and swam closer to the boat. I don't know why, but I felt the need to bend down. She lifted her hands toward me and touched me, bringing me down like she was going to kiss me, but suddenly her hands grabbed my throat and she started to strangle me. She grew gills on her neck and her teeth were sharp and monstrous. She started to pull me into the water while choking me. My hair went in the water before I felt arms around my body and was pulled back by Josh. "What's going on?" he said as he pulled me back. Then the singing started again. We looked into the water and saw 3 mermaids singing, beautiful and serene. Josh watched them and couldn't keep his eyes off them. He seemed to be in a trance. He took his shirt off and walked up to the edge of the boat. I tried to pull him back, but he just walked into the water. When he did, the mermaids all simultaneously grew gills and their teeth became sharp. They were immediately on Josh, biting his neck, arm, and stomach. He screamed before they dragged him into the water. I screamed as they ate him, biting off chunks from his flesh and tearing him apart. It wasn't long before they dragged him too deep and there was too much blood to see. I took a couple steps back before a figure splashed up onto the boat. It was one of the mermaids. She smiled wide at me with her teeth showing. She then crawled onto the boat. I grabbed a beer bottle and smashed it over her head. She yelled. I ran inside the boat, shut the doors, and ran up to the wheel. I started to drive the boat towards the shore. I heard the doors push open behind me. I turned and saw the mermaid standing there, human legs, but with fins and scales which turned into bare skin. She smiled at me with her teeth. She was bleeding, but her head wound was quickly healing until it was completely healed. She wiped the blood off her head, showing me her forehead like I never bottled her. Then she walked up to me and cornered me. I reached behind myself for weapons. I felt a flare gun and the keys to the boat. The mermaid smiled at me.
You hurt me, made me bleed.
She put her bloodied hand on my mouth as I froze with fear, then ran her nails along my stomach.
Allow me to return the favor,
she said before slashing her sharp claw-like nails across my stomach and went to bite my neck. I was able to push her away and raised up my arm to protect my neck. She bit my arm, which hurt a lot. I screamed before pulling the keys out of the ignition, and then I stabbed her in the eye. She yelled. I shoved her, then hit her with the butt of the flare gun and pushed her aside. I aimed the flare gun at her and pulled the trigger, but I stupidly forgot it wasn't loaded. I turned and pulled out a flare and loaded it into the gun. Before I could turn, the mermaid poked her nails into my back and bit me. I managed to tuck my shoulders above my neck, so she bit my shoulder. I screamed as her teeth went deep into my flesh. She dragged me backwards outside and tried pulling me into the water while still biting me, both her teeth and nails deep in my skin. At the last second, before she could drag me into the ocean, I managed to aim the flare gun at her face and squeezed the trigger. I fired the flare right into the other eye. She let go of me and fell into the water. I took a step back and watched her fall into the water, flare in her eye, her legs turning back into a tail. Suddenly, the other two mermaids grabbed the boat and started to climb aboard, both baring their teeth at me. I then grabbed 2 more tequila bottles and threw them right on the floor of the boat in front of them. I grabbed a lighter, and as they growled, I sparked the flame and threw it on the tequila, setting the boat on fire where they were getting on. I turned and ran inside, loaded the flare gun with 1 more flare, put the keys into the ignition, and started driving towards the shore. I turned and saw one of them open the door behind me, so I drove wildly, tipping the boat, making them lose their balance while they were shrieking at me. One fell into the water. I drove as fast as I could, but still was a couple miles from shore. I knew I couldn't make it to shore on time. I looked around and saw a petrol can sitting on the floor. I grabbed it, screwed off the cap, and went back to driving the boat. The doors opened behind me, and one of the mermaids stood there, teeth showing. I pulled out 1 more flare and grabbed the petrol can and threw it over towards her, tipping the petrol on the floor at her feet. I held the flare out, threatening to burn her alive. I looked over at the beach and saw I was a half a mile away. I lit the flare, threatening to throw it and set the monster on fire. That was when I heard a massive thud on the deck of the boat in front of me. I turned and saw the mermaid with the flare in her eye. She was furious, teeth baring at me. Out of desperation, I threw the flare at the other mermaid's feet, which lit up the petrol. She shrieked before jumping into the water. The mermaid grabbed me, breaking the glass, trying to pull me forward. I tried to aim at her face with the flare gun, but she grabbed my arm and bit down on my wrist. She bit down hard, and I accidentally pulled the trigger, which fired a flare in the air. She pulled me halfway onto the deck. My legs were still inside, touching the steering wheel. I grabbed a shard of glass and stabbed her in the shoulder. She shrieked and dug her claws into my arms, holding me down. I desperately kicked at the steering wheel, swaying the boat. Black smoke filled the room. The fire was spreading. The other two mermaids jumped on the boat. One dug her nails into my belly, and the other bit my leg. The one pinning me down was about to bite my throat when she turned, and all three jumped off me. I looked up and saw that the boat was fast approaching the beach. I laid there as the boat hit the sand and stopped on shore. I crawled off of the burning boat and onto the sand. That's when I blacked out. I woke up a minute later, being put onto a stretcher by lifeguards. They picked me up and started carrying me. I took one last look at the ocean, and the last thing I saw was the three mermaids watching me before they swam away. Staring at them, I blacked out again.